The alien officer was stranded. The ex-soldier helped her, so she gave him a data shard that changed everything. The heavy scent of burnt alloys and strange sweet pollen hung in the muggy twilight of the Lyran rainforest. Mason pressed his back to the rough trunk of a spiraling leaf tree, pulse carbine close, every movement calculated, deliberate. The air shimmered with heat, and the faint glow of bioluminescent spores drifting through shafts of dying sunlight. Somewhere above, fire still licked the upper canopy, tracing a molten wound through the green. A Zephyrian vessel had fallen here, its energy flare guiding him like a beacon in the gloom. He didn't breathe, not properly, not when so much depended on silence. Even the insects seemed to hush as he slipped between tangled roots and mammoth leaves. Every step was a risk. The mission was simple in theory. Find the guidance module, untouched, bring it back. Sable's voice echoed in his memory. Don't get clever, Mason. I want it clean. But nothing in the Lyran wilds ever went clean. He found the crash site half sunk in a sucking black marsh. The ship's hull, sleek, pale, seamless, had been torn like paper, exposing the guts of Zephyrian tech Mason knew better than to touch. Fires guttered along the edges, throwing up steam and the acrid tang of metal. As he edged closer, his boots squelched in viscous water. Around the wreckage, clawed footprints, four-toed, broad and deep, circled in hunting patterns. Not scavengers, he thought. Something worse. He moved fast, weaving through hanging cables and fractured metal, heart pounding. Inside the cockpit, chaos reigned. Shattered consoles, torn harnesses, and the guidance module, a crystalline core, shattered in its cradle. Mason let out a low, bitter curse, slamming his fist against the battered frame. Then he saw her. Movement, slight but unmistakable, flickered beneath a crumpled console. He brought his carbine up, finger poised. From the shadows emerged a tall figure. Alien. Unmistakably Zephyrian, but unlike any he'd seen. Her skin was a pale canvas marked by bold red and white stripes, patterns arching down strong limbs. Her hair, a cascade of vivid crimson, was pulled into intricate braids, each woven with silver filaments. Pointed ears rose from her head, glittering with jeweled cuffs that caught the faint light. Emerald eyes burned, sharp and unyielding. "Stay back, Terran, or I'll carve you open." Her voice was low, thick with pain and pride, one hand gripping a blade slick with her own blood. Mason didn't flinch, keeping the carbine steady, voice even. "You're in no shape to threaten anyone." He glanced at his scanner. Red pulses, closing fast. Predators, more than one, attracted by the wreck's energy and the scent of blood. A second's hesitation. He weighed his options. Abandon the mission, leave her to the pack, or try something stupid. His instincts, damn them, made the choice. Those things out there, they're hunting you. "I can get you out, but you'll have to trust me." He nodded at the door, weapon never wavering. "Or we both die here." She bared her teeth, but fear flickered in her gaze. For a moment, pride warred with survival. The blade dropped, humming off. Mason didn't wait. He drove his pry bar beneath the console, muscles straining, veins standing out on his arms. The twisted metal shrieked as it gave way, and suddenly she was free. Her leg bent at an ugly angle, blood seeping through the rent in her suit. He barely caught her before she hit the deck. No time for arguments. The scanner flared, a warning. Something enormous crashed against the hull. Mason spun, kicking a live cable into the marshy water just as the beast, a mass of fur, claws, and nightmarish jaws, lunged through the breach. Electricity arced blue and furious, and the creature dropped, smoking. He turned back to her. "Can you move?" She tried, teeth clenched in pain, and nearly collapsed. "Not alone," she admitted, voice raw. He didn't hesitate. Slinging his weapon, he lifted her, awkward, heavy, her arms slung over his shoulder, both of them slick with sweat and blood. He staggered out the breach as another howl split the dusk. Mason hurled a flash charge behind them. White light erupted, painting their shadows across the trees as the beasts howled in confusion. They crashed through tangled undergrowth, Mason's lungs burning. Vines whipped his face, thorns ripped his sleeves, but he didn't stop, didn't look back. Only when the noise of pursuit faded did he risk slowing. He found a grotto, hidden behind a thick curtain of vines, the air cool and damp. He set her down on a mossy ledge, breathless. For a moment the only sound was their ragged breathing. The truce between them was raw, uncertain, held together by necessity. She glared at him, but didn't stop him as he knelt beside her. "I need to see the injury," Mason said, voice low but firm. "Don't touch me," she hissed, but her hand shook as she tried to push him away. He ignored her, slicing away the shredded armor and part of her suit, revealing a deep gash along her thigh. Blood welled, dark and viscous, and she gritted her teeth, refusing to cry out. He worked quickly, hands practiced. A cleanser hissed as it sterilized the wound. Her fingers clawed the stone, but she did not scream. Mason sealed the gash with synth bandages, their glow soft in the dimness. He pulled a stim from his belt, pressing it into the muscle above her knee. She shivered, eyes closing for a moment. "Thank you," she muttered, voice barely above a whisper. He shook his head, checking his scanner. "Don't thank me yet. We're not out of this." She opened her eyes, watching him with a mix of suspicion and something else. He nodded at her, trying to break the silence. "You got a name?" A pause. Her chin lifted with stubborn pride. "Lieutenant," she said. "Nothing more." "Mason," he replied. Right now, titles don't matter. Only then did he notice the crystalline data shard clipped to her chest plate, a shimmering, multifaceted device pulsing softly. Her hands trembled as she unclipped it, gaze flickering between the jungle beyond and Mason. "If we're separated, this will let my people track you," she said, voice heavy with meaning. "Its value is greater than your life." He took it. The crystal was warm, humming in his palm, a strange pulse echoing in his mind. For a moment, as the twilight thickened around them, she entrusted her fate, and more, to him. Before sunrise, the predators were on their trail. The humid darkness pressed close, pierced only by Mason's steady breathing and the almost imperceptible rustle of Eris's limping footsteps beside him. The stimulant Mason had injected still burned in her veins, masking the worst of her pain, but the damage lingered. Every step sent a tremor up her wounded leg, though she never let him see her falter. Her jaw was set, eyes focused, lips compressed in stubborn silence. Mason pushed through tangled roots and gullies, every sense tuned to the threat that stalked them. The forest was alive with warning. Shadows shifting above, distant calls that never quite resolved into words. He checked their six, pausing often to listen. Aris matched his pace, saying nothing, her movements sharp and efficient despite the limp. She was a soldier, that much was clear, her discipline a match for his own. At a narrow ravine where the ferns grew shoulder-high, Mason halted. "We'll have to slow them down," he murmured, scanning the ground for anything he could use. Eris glanced at him, then at the shallow depression where a game trail cut through the brush. "Snare?" she asked, voice low and practical. He nodded, retrieving a coil of monofilament from his pack and a fallen branch thick enough to serve as a lever. They worked in silence, fingers brushing as they secured the nearly invisible line between two trees, the branch balanced above on a precarious fulcrum. Mason noticed the tremor in her hands as she tied the knots. and for a heartbeat he felt a flicker of her pain and her relentless resolve. Their eyes met, briefly, his guarded, hers burning with something softer beneath the steel. When the trap was set, they scrambled up a mossy rise above the path, hearts pounding. The distant howls drew closer, reverberating through the undergrowth. Mason drew his knife. Aris checked the charge on her energy blade, lips pressed white. The jungle went silent as the pack slunk into view. Hulking, mottled predators, fur bristling and jaws slavering. They padded into the snare, drawn by the scent of blood. "Wait," Mason whispered. Eris's breath was shallow, her fingers poised on the trigger. The largest beast stepped into the tripwire, and in one swift motion, Eris braced herself and triggered the branch. It snapped down with bone-breaking force, crushing two beasts in a sickening crunch. The rest, wild with fury, surged forward, eyes blazing. Aris didn't hesitate. She met the first with her blade, igniting it in a humming arc of blue-white light. Even wounded, she moved with ruthless efficiency, parrying the beast's jaws and driving the blade through its throat in one practiced strike. Blood sprayed, hissing against the blade. Mason fired twice, sharp shots cutting down another before it could leap. But the last beast, faster than the rest, sprang at him. Its claws raked his forearm, tearing through fabric and flesh in a white-hot slash. Mason stumbled, pain flashing bright, but managed to jam his knife up as the thing bore him to the ground. They rolled, teeth snapping inches from his face, breath hot and fetid. Mason twisted, driving the blade up under its ribcage. The beast spasmed and went limp. He shoved it off, panting. Blood streamed from his arm. Eris was already on her feet, surveying the carnage with a clinical eye. She sheathed her blade, glancing at Mason. "Clumsy, but effective," she said, one eyebrow arching in dry critique. He grunted, wiping blood from his cheek. "Survival doesn't care about style." He tossed her the carbine, showing her the safety and power selector. "You ever used one of these?" She took it, weighing the weapon in her hands. Terran tech is crude, but functional. Still, her fingers found the controls with quick intelligence, eyes narrowing as she memorized the settings. Skepticism lingered in her gaze, but Mason caught a flash of curiosity too. "Trigger's touchy," he warned, demonstrating the fire mode. "Pulse bursts only. Recoil'll break your shoulder if you're not ready." Eris nodded. "Understood." She leveled the carbine, tracking an imaginary threat through the brush, her posture impeccable even on an injured leg. Mason couldn't help but smile, just a little. There was a respect growing between them, shaped by necessity and sharpened by danger. For the first time since the crash, Eris's eyes softened as she handed the carbine back. "Thank you. For earlier," she said quietly, not meeting his gaze. "Don't mention it." Mason flexed his wounded arm, testing the cut. "You'd have done the same." She hesitated, then nodded. The unspoken bond between them, fragile and new, felt real. The hours blurred. They traveled in measured bursts, resting when they could, avoiding the main trails and doubling back to throw off pursuit. At night, they slept back to back, weapons in reach. Mason tended Eris's wound with what little he had, but he watched her grow paler each day. Fever crept into her eyes, her breath ragged as infection took hold. After 2 days, they stumbled upon a deserted prospector's camp. Rusted prefab huts slouched beneath ancient trees, a collapsed generator at the edge of a weed-choked clearing. Mason checked the perimeter, then helped Eris into the largest shelter, lowering her gently onto a dusty cot. She tried to protest, weak but stubborn. "I'm fine," she insisted, swatting at his hands. He ignored her. "You're infected. Rest, or you'll lose the leg." Mason's voice was firm, his eyes leaving no room for argument. She glared, but exhaustion won out. He pressed a flask of water into her hands, checking her temperature with the back of his fingers. She was burning up. "I'll be back," he promised, grabbing his knife and heading into the jungle. Aris watched him go, chest rising and falling in shallow breaths. Alone, she gripped the edge of the cot, willing herself not to slip into unconsciousness. The world blurred, heat and pain twisting together. Mason returned sometime later, arms full of broad-leafed plants, their veins pulsing with bioluminescent sap. He knelt beside her, crushing the leaves and packing them against the wound, the smell sharp and medicinal. She recoiled at first, then relented, letting him work. His hands were rough but gentle, movements careful as he bandaged her thigh and checked the fever's progress. Aris studied his scarred face, tracing the lines of pain and patience etched there. For a moment, she let herself lean into his touch. "You're a strange Terran," she whispered, voice hoarse. "Guess it takes one to save one," he replied, mouth twisting in a half-smile. That night, the fever broke. Aris slept fitfully, dreams haunted by the faces of her lost crew. Mason sat at the camp's battered comms array, soldering frayed wires and improvising circuits from salvaged components. Static hissed and popped as he tuned frequencies, trying to reach Sable. The Zephyrian data shard glimmered on the table, catching the pale light. Eris woke and watched him from the cot. She rose, shaky but determined, and limped over, offering him the data shard. "Here," she said quietly, pressing it into his palm. "There's more in it than you think." Mason slotted the shard into the comms port. "You know the encryption?" Eris nodded, guiding his hands over the alien interface. "Here, twist the lattice, then pulse the third node." Their hands overlapped, fingers brushing over glowing controls. Mason improvised, cross-wiring human and Zephyrian tech until a new screen flickered to life. Suddenly, the comms array vibrated. A hidden protocol revealed itself, an encrypted command pulsing in ancient Zephyrian glyphs. Eris stared, stunned. "That's impossible. The Helix Armada." Her voice faltered. "It's a recall code. The fleet, my people. They're waiting for this." Mason looked up, brow furrowed. "You mean your mission wasn't just retrieval?" She shook her head, tears brightening her emerald eyes. "They sent me to die. Told me I'd be a hero, that the fleet was lost. But this..." She choked on the words, voice trembling. "This is the signal. They lied. I was never meant to come back." Her defenses cracked at last. Tears traced the red and white stripes of her cheeks, her hands trembling as she pressed them to her face. Mason sat beside her, silent. He didn't offer platitudes, just his steady presence, a hand resting on her shoulder. The comms array cast blue shadows across the walls, the jungle outside eerily quiet. After a long pause, Aris reached for him, fingers trembling as they traced the jagged scar along his jaw. "Mason," she whispered, her voice raw and vulnerable. He let her touch linger, closing his eyes as she pressed her brow to his, their breaths mingling. The data shard pulsed between them, energy humming through the air, binding them in loss and hope. He kissed her then, a kiss born of survival, of two lost souls finding comfort in the darkness, clinging to the fragile promise of something more. Everything changed. Aris sat in the half-light of the abandoned prospector's hut, the comms array still humming softly in the corner, the data shard pulsing with impossible promise. The world she'd known was gone. Her faith in her command shattered, her future unmoored. All that remained was Mason, the Terran she'd once kept at arm's length, and the mission that had twisted into something new, recalling the Helix Armada, not for her superiors, but for themselves. Her thoughts were a tangle of loss and resolve as she stared at the battered map on the floor between them. Mason knelt beside her, one arm wrapped in bandages, his eyes never leaving her face. The signal tower, Eris said at last, voice steadier than she felt. If we reach the pinnacle, we can broadcast the recall. My fleet will come. Mason's jaw tightened. The pinnacle's deep in the shattered range. We'll have to cross half the wildlands and dodge every patrol in the sector. He traced a route across the map, marking hidden passes and forgotten outposts. It's possible? Risky, but possible. Her eyes flickered with gratitude. You know the ground. I trust you. She hesitated, then added, You're my only ally now. Mason squeezed her shoulder, rough thumb tracing the edge of her armor. We do this together. No one else. From that moment, their partnership shifted, no longer born of necessity, but of trust. Mason's wariness softened into a fierce protectiveness. Aris's discipline found purpose in new loyalty. Each day, as they prepared, Mason taught her the art of Terran stealth, how to vanish among the vines, how to muffle their scent with crushed fern, how to listen for danger in the twitch of leaves overhead. One morning, as dawn filtered through the canopy, Mason motioned for her to crouch beside him near a winding stream. Watch the water, he whispered, scanning the shadows. Predators wait for ripples. Move slow, like you're part of the river. Aris imitated his movements, lowering herself with deliberate grace. Mason watched her, noticing the subtle adjustments in her posture, the way she picked up his techniques with razor precision. You're a quick study, he murmured, impressed. She offered a wry smile. You're a better teacher than my instructors at Cadre. Her gaze lingered on him, softening. You trust your instincts. I was taught to ignore mine. He shrugged, half grinning. Instinct's all I've got left. Most days. Their lessons ran both ways. At night, Aris drew strategic maps in the dirt, showing Mason how to anticipate enemy formations, how to read the language of Zephyrian patrol signals. Discipline isn't just following orders, she said one evening, sketching out a feint and flank maneuver. It's seeing the field, the patterns behind the chaos. Mason leaned closer, studying her work. You see more than most. That's why you survived. She looked up, startled by the compliment, and the old barriers between them fell away, replaced by mutual respect and something deeper, admiration, even pride. They moved through the wildlands as a true team. Mason slipped through shadows, clearing paths, setting diversions. Aris scouted ahead, reading the land with her own alien intuition. They navigated the tangled gorges of the shattered range, scaling cliffs where Zephyrian sensors swept overhead. Each night, as exhaustion pressed in, they took turns on watch, relying on silent signals and the growing certainty of each other's presence. The tension between them shifted as well, once brittle, now charged with unspoken longing. Mason caught himself watching her as she tended her wound, the moonlight tracing the stripes along her thigh, the curve of her jaw. Eris's eyes lingered on him in return, her usual reserve giving way to frank curiosity. The lines of command, of species, blurred with each shared danger and quiet triumph. One night, as a cold wind swept down the mountains, they found shelter in the hollowed trunk of an ancient tree. Mason built a small fire in the heartwood, the flames casting golden light over the walls. Aris sat beside him, legs curled beneath her, the data shard resting between them. For a long moment they simply listened to the fire crackle and the distant cry of night creatures. Finally, Aris broke the silence, her voice soft. You taught me survival is its own honor. She reached for Mason's wounded arm, fingers tracing the fresh scar. I wouldn't have believed that before. Where I come from, honor meant sacrifice, obedience, the mission above all. She paused, searching his face. But you fight for what's in front of you. You make your own meaning. Mason caught her hand, holding it in his. I used to think survival was just getting by. But with you, it's more. Feels like a reason. Their gazes locked, the distance between them collapsing. Mason saw himself reflected in her eyes, not just as a soldier or a mercenary, but as a protector, a partner. The ache that had grown between them, fed by fear and hope, and everything unspoken, finally broke through. Eris's thumb brushed his cheek. "Mason," she whispered, her accent wrapping his name in warmth. He leaned in, their breaths mingling. "Eris." She kissed him, tentative at first, uncertain, testing the boundaries of this new world they had built together. Mason deepened the kiss, his hand rising to cup her cheek, thumb tracing the bold line of her markings. The firelight caught the glint of her jeweled ear cuffs, the shimmer of the data shard between them. Urgency surged between them, an honest, consuming need that drowned out the past. Mason's hands slipped beneath the edge of her armor, feeling the heat of her skin, the strength in her wounded body. Eris's fingers tangled in his hair, drawing him closer, her breath quickening. She pulled him down with her onto the moss-lined floor, their bodies aligning with instinctive precision. There was nothing hesitant now. Aris pressed herself to him, her lips fierce, her hands tracing the lines of old scars and new. Mason responded in kind, reverent and hungry, mapping her curves, the ridges of bone and muscle so different from his own. The world outside fell away. No Terran, no Zephyrian, just the press of skin against skin, the beating of hearts joined in the darkness. They made love with the desperation of survivors and the tenderness of those who have lost too much. Mason's rough hands turned gentle as he explored her, the rhythm of their bodies urgent, honest. Eris let herself be vulnerable, trusting him utterly, every wall she'd built crumbling under his touch. Their whispers mingled with the sounds of the forest, the promise of dawn flickering through the cracks in the ancient wood. After, they lay entwined, limbs tangled, Aris's head resting on Mason's chest. Her fingers traced idle circles over his skin, the silence between them thick with contentment and awe. "For the first time, I feel free," she murmured. Mason pressed his lips to her temple. "We're not just human and Zephyrian anymore. We're us." She smiled, tears glimmering in her emerald eyes, not of pain, but of hope. "Mason and Eris," she said, savoring the words. "That's enough." Their bond was sealed in that hollowed log, beneath the alien stars, deeper than any oath, fiercer than any command. Whatever waited at the pinnacle, they would face it together. The trek to the pinnacle was a plunge into Lyran's wildest depths. Each morning, the forest seemed to press closer, trunks twisting into near vertical spirals, vines as thick as a man's arm dangling overhead. Dangers breathed in every shadow, razor-leafed plants that snapped at passing boots, venomous blue motes that swarmed in clouds at dusk, distant howls hinting at beasts too large to name. Mason and Eris moved through it as one, steps matched, communication pared down to the essentials. A single glance sent Eris flanking wide along a slope, silent as a wraith. A subtle nod from Mason meant hold, wait, danger. They barely spoke now, but the air between them vibrated with understanding. Mason read the tilt of her head, the narrowing of her eyes. Aris saw the tension in his shoulders, the way his fingers flexed around his carbine. Their partnership had become instinctive, wordless, an unbreakable circuit. It was near midday when they reached the ravine, a gouge in the earth choked with mist and overgrown stone. The warning signs were there, trees clawed bare, a stench of musk and iron on the wind. Mason crouched at the edge, peering through the foliage. "Lanthus," Eris whispered, voice a thread of sound. She pointed to the shapes below. Massive, armored brutes with sloped heads and tails like spiked whips, prowling the ravine floor in a loose pack. The alpha led, scales ridged with old scars. Aris's hand went to her blade, eyes flashing. "We strike before they scent us." Mason shook his head. "Not head-on. We use the rocks. Force the Alpha out." He scanned the terrain, jagged ledges, loose scree, a fallen trunk bridging a narrow gap above. "I'll draw it. You get high, wait for my mark." She hesitated, pride warring with trust, then nodded. Mason slipped down slope, keeping to cover. He broke a branch, snapped it loud enough to echo. The Alpha's head jerked, nostrils flaring, and it thundered toward him, bellowing. Mason fired a pulse just wide, kicking up dirt, taunting it. The beast lunged, smashing through ferns. High above, Eris scaled the cliff, muscles bunching, breath steady. She found her perch, a jutting outcrop above the ravine. Mason darted, weaving, keeping the Alpha's attention fixed on him. At his sharp whistle, Eris leaped, dropping from the rocks with her blade flashing. She landed astride the Alpha's armored back, driving the blade down between its ridges. The beast roared, thrashing, trying to throw her. Mason took his shot. 1, 2, 3 precise bursts into its exposed flank. The Alpha staggered, weakened. Eris clung tight, blade wrenching deeper until, with a final shudder, the Lantha crashed to its knees and fell silent. The rest of the pack scattered, spooked by the Alpha's fall. Mason jogged to Aris, grinning despite the sweat streaming down his brow. She slid off the corpse, face flushed with exhilaration, eyes wild. "That was cunning," she said, a fierce smile breaking through. "And worthy." He offered his hand, helping her up. "Teamwork. Gets the blood pumping, doesn't it?" She laughed, the sound bright and clear in the heavy air. For a moment, they were just two survivors, victorious and alive. Later, by a silver stream that cut through moss and shattered stone, they cleaned their weapons in companionable silence. The mood was softer. The adrenaline faded. Mason wiped his blade, watching Aris as she knelt to refill their canteens. Her movements were graceful, precise, but he saw the fatigue in her posture. She glanced up, catching his gaze. "You should know. The Alpha who downed my ship. It still hunts us. It's clever. Persistent." Her voice was quieter now, carrying the weight of old wounds. Mason shrugged, a crooked smile tugging at his lips. "I'm not afraid of it. I only fear dying for nothing." He gestured to the mountains, jagged spires etched against the sky. "This, what we're doing, it matters. It's worth the risk." Aris knelt beside him, drawing his blade across the whetstone, her fingers brushing his hand. "You sharpen more than weapons, Mason. You sharpen resolve." She smiled, softer now. "Whatever comes, we face it together." Their bond was a current, warm, electric, flowing beneath every word and touch. Pride, loyalty, desire all mingled, forging them into something stronger than the sum of their scars. Night fell as they climbed toward the pinnacle, the trees thinning, the ground turning to stone and broken root. The path narrowed to a bridge, a slender span of fused wood and ancient bone, arching over a gorge so deep the bottom was lost to mist. Mason paused, instincts prickling. He scanned the shadows, then held out an arm to halt Eris. She frowned. "Why stop?" He pointed to faint grooves in the earth, tracks, deliberate and fresh. "It's a trap. The Alpha wants us here." Eris drew her blade, every muscle tensed. "We can fight." "Not here," Mason cut in, already working. He set a charge at the base of the bridge, motioning her back. "I'll collapse the span. You get across first. Now." She ran, light on her feet, vanishing into the gloom beyond the bridge. Mason stayed, watching the shadows shift at the far end. The Alpha emerged, flanked by smaller predators, eyes burning, jaws slavering. Mason waited, thumb on the detonator. The beasts rushed, claws scraping the planks. He let them come, heart hammering. At the last second, he triggered the charge. The world exploded in thunder and splinters. The bridge dropped, splitting apart in a rain of debris. Mason dove for the near side, rolling hard. Two lanthas tumbled into the abyss, howling. The Alpha caught the edge, claws digging in, then heaved itself up, fury burning in its eyes. Mason scrambled to his feet, blood running from a gash on his thigh. The Alpha lunged, slamming him to the ground. He fought with everything he had, knife flashing, fists pounding. The beast's weight crushed the air from his lungs. He twisted, ramming his blade into its shoulder. The Alpha reared back, roaring. Across the chasm, Aris appeared, eyes blazing. She launched herself onto a narrow ledge, circling behind the Alpha. The beast spun, sensing her, and they clashed, blade against claws, rage against discipline. Aris was battered, blood streaking her temple, but she moved with relentless purpose, every strike calculated. The duel was brutal. The Alpha feinted, slashed, Aris dodged, countered, driving her blade deep. The beast roared, charging her, but she pivoted, using its own momentum to topple it onto the fractured edge. With a final savage strike, she drove her blade into its throat. The Alpha shuddered and went still. For a moment, the only sound was the echo of battle fading into silence. Mason dragged himself upright, wiping blood from his brow, watching Aris as she stood, breathless, silhouetted against the sky. Across the chasm, they locked eyes. Aris lifted her blade in salute, a gesture of deep respect. Mason mirrored her, pressing a fist to his heart. The hunt was over. Their mission, battered but unbroken, remained. Whatever else waited at the pinnacle, they would face it side by side. At the pinnacle, a spire of ancient crystal thrusting from the shattered peaks, Mason and Aris arrived just as the first light crept over the horizon. The wind howled around them, carrying the tang of ozone and the warning scent of distant predators. The beacon itself stood in the center of a platform carved by unknown hands. A massive pillar, faceted and pulsing with deep inner light. Alien glyphs spiraled across its surface, shifting and flowing as if alive, awaiting a command. Aris approached first, her breathing steady, the data shard glowing at her breast. As she drew near, the glyphs writhed faster, recognizing her presence. She pressed the shard to the beacon's heart. The surface shimmered, a panel sliding open to reveal a lattice of controls, each one singing with a tone beyond Mason's hearing. Mason watched her, awe and worry warring in his chest. "Can you do it?" he asked quietly. She gave a tight smile, eyes shining. "It's beautiful. The logic, intuitive. Like you." Her hands danced across the interface, unlocking ancient protocols with a grace that seemed almost effortless. She murmured in Zephyrian, fingers finding the right sequence. Lights flared in response, lines of alien code resolving beneath her touch. But with every pulse of the beacon, a deeper sound rolled through the pinnacle, a low, thrumming bass note that vibrated in Mason's bones. He stepped to the edge of the platform, scanning the wild slopes below. The forest moved. Shadows poured from the trees, predators drawn by the beacon's call. Razor-backed lanthas, slithering creepers, and pack beasts with eyes like burning coals. The ground shook with their numbers, their roars rising in a terrible chorus. He turned back to Aris, voice grim. "They're coming, every last one." She didn't look up, but her trust was absolute. "I need a few more minutes." Mason nodded. He loaded the last of his ammo, 3 battered clips, 2 grenades. Not enough, not nearly, but all he had. He took position at the mouth of a narrow pass, the only way up to the beacon, heart pounding like a drum. He looked back once, found Eris's gaze on him. Steady, fierce, full of love. He forced a grin, winking. "Don't be late." Eris's lips quirked in answer, her eyes burning with everything unspoken. The first wave hit. Mason's world shrank to muzzle flashes and guttural screams, the smell of spent charge and blood. He fired until the carbine overheated, then switched to his knife, fighting with savage determination. For every beast he dropped, two more pressed in. His arms burned, vision narrowing. He fought for every heartbeat, every inch, for her. A shadow loomed overhead. Mason looked up to see a predator ship descending. Massive, bristling with weapons, its hull scarred from battles won and lost. It hovered above the pinnacle, floodlights sweeping the platform, hatches opening to disgorge armed figures. The ship's main cannon swiveled, locking onto Eris's position at the beacon. Mason stumbled, blood running down his arm. He turned to Eris, his breath ragged. She glanced up, reading his silent farewell in an instant. "Almost done," she called, voice trembling but unbroken. He straightened, raising his blade in both hands, body battered but unbowed. "I love you," he shouted, voice cracking across the chaos. Her eyes met his, fierce and shining. "I know," she answered, steady as the sunrise. The final onslaught broke over him, beasts snapping at his legs, the ship's troopers firing from above. Mason fought like a man possessed, blade flashing, body driven by love and raw will. A grenade blast hurled bodies back, buying seconds. He could barely see through the blood and sweat, but he held the line, refusing to yield. Then a massive lantha crashed into him, claws tearing his shoulder. He went down hard, vision swimming as the world tilted. Mason clawed for his knife, but the weight was too much. The ship's cannon whined, charging for a killing shot, deadly light aimed at Eris. On the platform, Eris worked feverishly, glyphs spinning faster beneath her hands. The beacon pulsed, its light growing blinding. "Now!" she screamed, slamming the shard home. A shockwave burst from the beacon, a surge of pure energy, blue-white and wild, racing outward in a ring. Every predator on the slope froze, stunned by the force. The ship's systems flickered, then died. Its engines sputtered, weapons powering down as the surge fried every circuit. Mason was hurled backward by the blast, pain and heat crashing over him. He landed hard, the world dimming, breath shallow and ragged. Around him, silence fell, beasts stunned, the ship dead in the air. He could only just see Eris, illuminated by the beacon's light, running to his side. She dropped to her knees, hands frantic on his face, her tears hot against his skin. "Stay with me," she begged, voice breaking. "Please, Mason, stay." He reached for her, managing a faint, bloody smile. The data shard pulsed in her hand, a triumphant chime echoing through the crystal spire. The signal was sent. "We did it," he breathed, voice barely audible. "It's over." Above them, the sky tore open, rifts blossoming in the clouds, light cascading through. Ships, sleek, immense, unmistakable, emerged from the void, the Helix Armada returning at last. Eris cradled him close, hope and relief mingling in her eyes as the beacon's light washed over them both. The air crackled with victory and promise. Still kneeling beside Mason, Eris gazed upward, her breath caught in wonder. The Helix Armada, her people's lost fleet, spoken of in legends and quiet prayers, now soared above Liran's sky in a storm of silver and blue. Hundreds of ships emerged from the rifts, their hulls shimmering with alien light, engines leaving trails of fire that danced against the breaking dawn. The jungle canopy, once a cage, became a theater for this impossible arrival. Eris pressed a trembling hand to her lips, tears streaming unchecked, her heart thundering with awe and relief. Mason, battered but alive, squeezed her hand gently. His palm was rough, the grip grounding her to this moment, this world they had won together. She looked down at him, his face streaked with blood and dirt, but eyes burning with new purpose. In their shared silence, so much passed between them. The terror of loss, the euphoria of survival, the sheer magnitude of what they had changed. Aris leaned close, her forehead touching his. "You're here. You made it." He smiled, voice rough but steady. "Wouldn't miss this for anything." He brushed a knuckle across her cheek, smearing away her tears. "We did it, Eris. You and me." She laughed, a bright, unguarded sound, full of disbelief and joy. "The Armada," they answered. "Liran will never be the same." Mason's gaze drifted skyward, watching the ships organize into flawless formation. "You called them home. You changed everything." She shook her head, still amazed. "Not alone." Her grip tightened. "It took both of us." Around them, the sounds of the jungle changed, predators stilled, the air charged with the presence of the fleet overhead. Where once every living thing had been a threat, now the world seemed to pause, bearing witness to the moment. The Pinnacle's crystal beacon still pulsed gently, the data shard now set at its heart. Where it had once been a symbol of Eris's isolation, it now glowed with the promise of unity, the seal of a bond that was both personal and galactic. Mason shifted, wincing as pain lanced through his side, but he grinned at her, refusing to show weakness. "What happens now?" he asked. Eris sat back, exhaling slowly. "Politics, negotiation, maybe war." She studied him, her expression suddenly serious. "But I won't let them use you, Mason, or what we've done." He shook his head. "We stand together, whatever comes. I'm done running." He reached for her, pulling her close. "You're not just a lost officer anymore, Eris, and I'm more than a gun for hire. We're partners now. Survivors. Heroes, maybe." She kissed his brow, her voice soft and sure. "We are." Together they sat, watching as the first shuttles broke formation and descended toward the Pinnacle. Searchlights swept over the jungle, scanning for the two figures who had changed the fate of worlds. Mason and Aris exchanged a look, equal parts pride and uncertainty. Their journey had rewritten both their stories. He was no longer a shadow in someone else's war, and she was no longer lost in duty's cold grip. The jungle that had once conspired to kill them now seemed transformed, hallowed by their struggle and love. The wounds on Mason's arms and the fatigue lining Eris's face bore witness to the price of survival, but also to a deeper, truer honor. The kind found only when two lives become one against the wild. The data shard, resting in the beacon's core, caught the light of the rising sun and scattered it in brilliant arcs. Eris's hand lingered on it, thumb brushing its surface. "This was once just an order," she murmured. "A burden. Now it's our future." Mason covered her hand with his own, his fingers warm and steady. "You're my future." She smiled, her eyes shining with hope and fierce determination. "Whatever comes, I want to face it with you." He nodded, solemn and true. "Always." As the sun crested the horizon, painting the jungle in gold and fire, a gentle rustling came from the edge of the clearing. Eris turned, curiosity piqued. From the tangled ferns, a small creature padded into view, a feline shape with red and white striped fur, oversized tufted ears, and a long banded tail that curled with regal ease. Its eyes, a brilliant green, shone with uncanny intelligence. Around its neck gleamed an ornate iridescent collar, the metal shifting color in the light. The little beast trotted straight to Aris, sniffing her hand and giving a soft, musical trill. Aris laughed, her whole posture relaxing. "This is Sira," she said, stroking the animal's silken back. "She's been with me since childhood, my first companion, before I ever wore a uniform." Mason watched, charmed and a little bewildered, as Syrah turned her gaze on him, assessing. The creature's eyes seemed to weigh his soul. Then, with a feline huff, she nuzzled Eris's hand and curled up beside them, tail flicking across Mason's boot. Eris smiled, her hand never leaving Syrah's fur. She knows we're safe now. She always could sense when things changed. Her gaze softened, turning inward. She stayed hidden all this time. I think she was waiting for this moment too. Mason reached out, letting Syrah sniff his fingers before scratching behind her ears. The animal purred, content. You Zephyrians and your secrets, he teased gently. Eris laughed, a low sound rich with happiness. Not secrets, just hope, even in the wildest jungle. They rested there, Mason, Eris, and Syrah, the armada glinting overhead, the jungle silent and peaceful at last. The pinnacle stood behind them, not just a monument, but a promise kept. The war for survival was over, at least for this dawn. In its place was something rarer: trust, love, and the certainty that even in the heart of the wild, hope could be found and kept. As the sun climbed higher, Mason wrapped his arm around Eris, drawing her close. She leaned into him, her hand twined with his, Syrah purring at their feet, a living symbol of the new world they had won, together. Our story ends here. Make sure you subscribe, press the like button, and tell us in the comments what stood out to you the most in this video. Your feedback means a lot to our team. You'll discover many more captivating stories on our channel. See you in the next one.